I just finished setting the last dinner plate around the oak table when I noticed that same look on Ethan's face, the one he always wore before pitching me another big idea. His eyes lit up like a kid on Christmas morning, tapping away on his sleek laptop. "George, perfect timing," he said, spinning the screen toward me. From the kitchen, Melissa, my daughter, paused mid-step, holding a steaming bowl of mashed sweet potatoes. "Go ahead, honey, show Dad." I glanced at the framed photos lining the wall: Melissa's wedding, my grandkids' graduations, Thanksgiving dinners, 15 years of shared moments, 15 years of checks written, mortgages paid, emergencies covered. "This is it," Ethan said, brimming with confidence. "My tech startup is ready to launch. Software platform complete, beta tested, just needs funding for servers and office space." He pointed at his colorful charts. The number on the screen made my chest tighten. $200,000 initial investment. "I know you've always supported us," Ethan pressed on. "This isn't just a loan. It's an investment in our family's future." I set the last fork down and let my voice drop a shade lower. "Ethan, I've been helping you too for 15 years. I'm tired of being your bank." Melissa's smile vanished. "Dad, this is huge for us. If you're not part of our success, maybe you shouldn't be part of this family at all." Her words hit like a winter gust off Lake Michigan. My fork slipped to the hardwood floor with a clang. "What did you just say?" I asked, more stunned than angry. "You heard me," she said, setting the bowl down with a thud. "If you can't help when we really need it, then maybe you shouldn't be here." Ethan tried to calm her, but she brushed him off. "We've given you a home for 5 years, Dad. And now you're turning your back on us?" 5 years. That's how long it had been since Linda, my wife of 42 years, passed away. Melissa had insisted I move in after the funeral. "Family takes care of family," she'd said. Now those same lips were telling me to leave. I didn't say another word. I just walked upstairs to the room I'd been calling mine, closed the door, and sat on the bed. The photos on my nightstand: Melissa at 16 in her prom dress, Melissa holding newborn Grace, Christmas mornings full of laughter, now felt like mocking reminders. When had my help become an expectation? When had gratitude turned into entitlement? Through the walls, I could hear muffled arguing between Melissa and Ethan. But instead of joining, I opened my old filing cabinet, the one I'd kept organized since my Navy days. Receipts, bank statements, every transfer I'd ever made to help them. And that night, for the first time in years, I began calculating exactly how much help I'd given. I spread the papers across my desk like evidence in a court case, my court case. The receipts told a story I already knew but had never tallied in full. June 2010, Melissa's wedding. I paid for the venue in Chicago, the photographer, the catering, the band. $48,000 right there. I could still hear Linda back then saying, "She deserves a fairy tale, George." Then came the house. Ethan and Melissa couldn't qualify for a mortgage on their own, so I covered their down payment and paid the monthly mortgage whenever they came up short. That was most months. 5 years of $1,600 payments, $96,000. Their cars: Melissa's SUV when Grace was born, Ethan's truck when his old beater died. Insurance premiums when their credit was too low to get a fair rate. Medical bills when Ethan's promising ventures didn't have health coverage. Grace's tuition, Jack's trade school fees, anniversary trips they couldn't afford but really needed for their marriage. The calculator on my desk beeped softly as the total climbed: $310,000, $370,000, $428,000. By the time I added it all, the number sat heavy in my chest: $471,000 in 15 years. Nearly $500,000. Not loans. Not investments. Just gone. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the power of attorney document Melissa had insisted on 3 years earlier, when I was recovering from knee surgery. Just in case there's an emergency, she'd said. It gave her full access to my accounts. That paper went through the shredder in less than 10 seconds. Watching those neat, legal lines turn into thin strips felt like breathing fresh air for the first time in months. I picked up the phone and called my bank in downtown Grand Rapids. "This is George Whitman. Cancel all automatic transfers to account ending in 5231. The woman on the other end asked if I'd like to give a reason. "Yes," I said plainly. "I'm tired of being taken for granted." That night, I slept better than I had in years. Friday morning, I drove into the city and met Carl Edwards, a realtor recommended by an old Navy buddy. We toured a small apartment in a quiet neighborhood near the river, 1 bedroom, hardwood floors, close to the bus line. "It's not big," Carl said, "but it's yours. And it's move-in ready." I didn't need to see more. "I'll take it." 2 hours later, with the lease signed and the keys in my pocket, I drove back to Melissa's house. The driveway was empty, Melissa at work at the hospital, Ethan probably, networking, at some cafe. I walked inside and moved quickly. The photo albums from my marriage, mine. The flag from my father's service, mine. My Navy medals, mine. The recliner Linda had bought me for my 70th birthday, they could keep that. They'd gotten used to it in their living room. The piano Melissa had claimed after Linda's funeral stayed too. Let her keep it for the grandkids she always talked about but never seemed to make time for. At noon, the moving crew arrived, 3 young guys and a truck barely fitting the driveway. "Everything with the green stickers goes," I told them. "Everything else stays." They were done in under 2 hours. I left a plain white envelope on the kitchen table with a short note. "Melissa and Ethan. I've moved out. Keys are on the counter. I've stopped all financial support. You wanted independence from my expectations. I'm giving you independence from my assistance. Don't contact me until you're ready to apologize. Dad." By the time they came home to find it, I was unpacking boxes in my new apartment. That night, my phone rang. Melissa's voice came sharp and frantic. "Dad, what is this? You can't just leave." "I took your advice," I said calmly. "You told me not to expect to stay here. So I'm not. You're being ridiculous. Come back, we can talk about this." "No," I said. "We'll talk when you're ready to have a real conversation about respect." Then I hung up, and for the first time in 15 years, I felt truly free. Monday morning, I walked into the marble lobby of First Grand Bank with a manila folder tucked under my arm. The winter wind off the Grand River had bitten through my coat, but inside it was all quiet hums and polished surfaces. "Mr. Whitman?" The banker, James Carter, mid-40s in a crisp navy suit, shook my hand firmly. "I understand you want to review some accounts." We sat in his corner office, sunlight spilling over the leather chairs. "I need to cancel an automatic transfer," I said, sliding the paperwork across. $4,200 a month. Been going to my daughter's mortgage account for 5 years straight." James's brow furrowed as he tapped at his keyboard. "Yes, I see it here. That's quite a substantial commitment. Are you sure you want to stop it?" "Absolutely," I said without hesitation. He gave a low whistle when the total appeared on his screen. "Mr. Whitman, that's $471,000 over the last 15 years, including smaller transfers and emergency payments." I'd already done the math at home, but hearing it from him made the weight of it settle deeper. James printed the full statement, page after page of transactions that had quietly bled my accounts dry. "I'll have the transfers canceled today," he said. By noon, I was 3 blocks away in the law offices of Robert Langford, a man recommended by an old fishing buddy. The receptionist had squeezed me into his schedule after I mentioned the words asset protection and family dispute. Lawyers like urgency, especially when it comes with billable hours. Robert listened intently as I told him about Melissa and Ethan, the years of temporary help, the unending emergencies, the threats when I refused to sign their latest scheme. You've enabled them, Robert said plainly. But that can be corrected. We'll move your assets into a trust with your granddaughter Grace as the sole beneficiary. That way, Melissa has no legal path to them. I signed the first set of documents within the hour. The notary's stamps sounded like locks clicking shut. Walking back to my apartment with the folder of certified copies, I felt lighter than I had in years. That evening, at exactly 7 p.m., my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Ethan standing there with a bouquet of yellow roses, a cheap, last-minute peace offering. I opened the door but didn't step aside. George, he said, his smile tight. Can we talk? Melissa feels terrible about what she said. I gestured for him to come in, not because I was swayed, but because I wanted to hear what angle he'd try next. He settled on my second-hand couch, glancing around the modest apartment with something between disappointment and disbelief. Nice place. Very minimalist. I stayed in the armchair opposite him. What's on your mind, Ethan? He launched into his pitch. I know things got heated the other night, but this startup really is different. We just need $200,000 to get it off the ground. You'd get a return on investment, of course. I let him talk himself in circles for 5 minutes before asking, when was the last time you remembered my birthday? That stopped him cold. What? My birthday. Without Melissa reminding you. He blinked. That's not really. It's February 14th, I said. Hard to forget, you'd think. But you have, 12 years running. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. We're talking about important family matters here. I stood and looked out the window at his truck parked illegally in the loading zone. You didn't visit me in the hospital last spring after my surgery. Melissa came once. Grace came twice. You sent a card. His tone sharpened. What does that have to do with a business investment? Everything, I said, turning back to face him. You only remember I exist when you need money. That's not investment, Ethan, that's dependency. His smile cracked, replaced by a scowl. Fine. You want honesty? Melissa and I have been carrying this family since Linda died. Hosting dinners, managing your social life, giving you purpose. You owe us. My purpose, I said evenly, is living in peace without being used as an ATM. Ethan shot to his feet. You'll regret this, George. Family doesn't just walk away. I didn't walk away, I replied. I finally stood still while you kept walking toward the cash register. He left in a huff, slamming the door so hard the frame rattled. Through my window, I watched him storm down the street, phone already to his ear, probably calling Melissa to report the failure of his charm offensive. It was the first time in 15 years I hadn't felt guilty for saying no. 2 days later, the knock on my door was soft, almost rehearsed, followed by the faint scent of cinnamon. When I opened it, Melissa stood there with a white pastry box in her hands, smiling the way she used to when she wanted me to forget she'd dented the car or skipped curfew. Dad, she said brightly, I brought your favorite, apple pie from Morrison's Bakery. Just like Mom used to make. The smell was good, I'll admit. But the box was too perfect, the kind of neat crimping and glossy sheen you only get from a professional kitchen. I stepped aside and let her in. She wore a soft blue sweater, hair just so, makeup light and natural, the Melissa who came out when she was after sympathy, not confrontation. Remember how Mom baked one every Sunday after church? She asked as she set the pie on my counter. I remembered all right, mostly Linda burning the crust or forgetting the sugar and laughing about it anyway. But I kept that to myself. Coffee? I asked. That would be lovely, she said, settling herself on my couch like it was still hers. We went through the motions, filling the machine, getting mugs. I knew this dance well, small talk first, then the real reason for the visit. She started with the nostalgia hook. I've been thinking about when you taught me to ride a bike. You ran alongside me for 3 blocks even though your back was bad that summer. You've always been there for me, Dad, school plays, graduation, my wedding. Her voice wavered just enough to suggest tears on standby. I set her coffee down, cream and 1 sugar, the way she's taken it since she was 8. When I was in the hospital last year after my surgery, I said evenly. You came once? Grace came twice. Jack called me every day. You sent flowers. She blinked, caught off guard. Dad, that's not fair. I was working, the kids were. They're adults now, Melissa. Grace is 20, Jack's 22. What kids are you still raising? Her voice sharpened. We're doing everything we can to keep the house. If you help just this once, Ethan's business could. Maybe it's time you both found full-time work instead of treating my savings like a second income. The tears vanished in an instant, replaced by anger. I do work, I manage a household, support Ethan's career, take care of. I didn't interrupt. I just let her run it out. Eventually she slumped back, exhausted from her own speech. Mom would be heartbroken, she said finally, her voice low but deliberate. This isn't the father who raised me. The father who raised you, I said quietly, is tired of financing your bad habits. She stood, grabbed her purse, and walked to the door with all the wounded dignity she could muster. Fine. But when you're sitting here alone wondering why your family doesn't visit, remember this. The door shut behind her, leaving the pie untouched on my counter. I stared at it for a while before opening the box. It was flawless, the crust perfectly golden, the filling sweet and spiced. But all I could taste was obligation disguised as dessert. Later that week, my phone buzzed with a text from Jack. Grandpa, can I come by Sunday? Mom and Dad are acting weird. At least one of them still wanted to see me without a handout. Sunday afternoon, he knocked, though he still had the key I'd given him years ago. Hey, Grandpa, he said, wandering inside like it was still his second home. His jeans sagged, his boots were untied, and the flannel shirt looked like it had been crumpled in the back of his truck for a week. Coffee? I asked. Sure. He flopped onto the couch without waiting for an invitation, stretching his legs across the cushions I'd straightened that morning. The coffee maker gurgled while I studied him, same stubborn jawline as his mother, but with Linda's eyes, warm brown flecked with gold. So, I said, setting his mug down, what's going on? He shrugged, the kind of casual roll that usually meant trouble. I need a favor. Just $3,000. Credit card got a little out of hand. When are you planning to pay it back? You don't have a job. I'll find something. Maybe with cars, you know I'm good with engines. I reached into my wallet and pulled out the business card I'd been saving for him. Frank Patterson's looking for a mechanic's assistant. $15 an hour, benefits after 90 days. Jack frowned. I don't want to work for some random guy. I just need quick cash to clear my debt, then I'll figure things out. I kept my voice even. The debts from what? Gas? Rent? He hesitated. Stuff. Food. Clothes. A couple bar tabs. Maybe some concert tickets. Video games? I asked. His eyes darted away. Sometimes. I slid the card toward him again. This is a real chance. Skills, steady income, pride in what you do. He pushed it back. You've become cheap, Grandpa. You always used to help. I also paid $8,000 for your welding certification. You dropped out halfway. That was different. I had other opportunities like sleeping till noon? His jaw tightened. You don't understand how hard it is for my generation. What I understand, I said. is that you're 22 and the only thing standing in your way is you. When he realized I wasn't budging, he stood. Fine. Don't expect me to visit anymore. Don't expect me to care when you're old and lonely. I'm already old, I said, and I'm learning to prefer lonely over used. The door slammed, rattling my neighbor's wind chimes. The very next evening, my phone rang. The name on the screen made me smile. Grace. Grandpa, she said, her voice tight. You wouldn't believe the chaos at home. Mom's screaming that everything's your fault. Dad's been pacing around like a caged animal. What's Ethan say about his big business venture? I asked, already guessing the answer. He sold his pickup yesterday. Says the bank's threatening foreclosure if they miss another mortgage payment. I let out a slow breath. 15 years of automatic transfers, and they couldn't make it 2 weeks without me. Maybe it's time they grow up, I said. Grace sighed. Mom picked up extra shifts at the hospital. She's working 60 hours a week, coming home angry and exhausted. They're fighting constantly. Part of me felt for her, but another part, the part that had been drained dry for over a decade, knew this was the price of reality finally showing up. That Wednesday morning, I walked along the Grand River Trail, my phone buzzing with calls from Melissa. I ignored every one of them. The spring air felt warmer than it had in months. Or maybe it was just that freedom has its own kind of heat. I'd settled into a new routine: coffee at 7, the morning paper till 8, a walk by 9:30. No guilt-laden calls about overdue bills. No urgent texts asking for just a little help to get through the month. The old man who fed pigeons by the park bench nodded at me as I passed. We never exchanged names, but we had an unspoken understanding, two men who had chosen peace over family drama. You look happier these days, he said, tossing breadcrumbs. Learning to live for myself, I replied. Smart, he said. Family will drain you dry if you let him. When I got home, there were 17 text messages waiting. Melissa, Dad, please call. We can work this out. The bank needs $8,400 right now or they start foreclosure. Ethan's applying for loans, but his credit's shot. I'm working double shifts. My feet are bleeding. The neighbors are talking. Please, just this once. I deleted them all without answering. Then I logged into my bank account. My balance was steady, protected under the trust Robert had set up. Melissa couldn't touch a cent. That night during dinner, Grace called again. Mom collapsed at work. Exhaustion. She's okay, but… Grandpa, I get why you're angry. Still, seeing her like this… Your mother chose this path, I said gently. I gave her boundaries. She tried to manipulate her way around them. Grace was quiet a moment. Jack came by today asking for money for rent. Mom yelled at him for 30 minutes. Good, I said. Maybe they're all starting to learn. Through my kitchen window, I could see the city lights flicker on. Somewhere out there, Melissa was working herself ragged trying to maintain a lifestyle my money had made possible. Ethan was discovering charm didn't cover mortgage payments. Jack was facing the first real consequences of his adult life. I should have felt guilty. But instead, I felt lighter than I had in years. It was around 10 p.m. when I noticed movement outside my building. I turned off the lights and stepped back into the shadows, watching from my window. A group of figures gathered at the entrance. Ethan was at the front, gesturing like a general giving orders. Behind him, Melissa, Jack, and two older folks I recognized from the wedding, Ethan's parents, Robert and Linda Harris. Grace trailed a few steps behind, her body language screaming reluctance. I counted 6 in total. 60 seconds later, they were in my hallway. The pounding on my door was immediate. George, open up. We need to talk. Robert Harris barked, his voice carrying the kind of authority that comes from decades of expecting obedience. Through the peephole, I saw them lined up like an intervention panel, Ethan holding flowers again, Melissa clutching tissues, Jack sulking near the back, Robert and Linda flanking like backup singers in a very unpleasant musical. "You're destroying this family," Robert announced when I didn't respond. "Ethan's a good man trying to build something." I opened the door but didn't step aside. "Your son's been using me as an ATM for 15 years. Family duty," Linda shot back, her tone high and sharp. "You should be helping the younger generation get established." "I helped establish a pattern of dependency," I said. "Now I'm breaking it." Melissa stepped forward, mascara smudged. "Dad, please. We could lose everything." "Then maybe," I said evenly. "You shouldn't have told me not to expect to stay much longer." Robert bristled. "You're being selfish. At your age, you should be thinking about your legacy." "My legacy," I said, "is teaching responsibility, not funding irresponsibility." Jack muttered from the back. "You're being mean, Grandpa. You never used to be like this." And that's when Grace's voice, clear and steady, cut through all of them. "When did any of you visit him in the hospital? When did you remember his birthday without being told? You're all here for one reason: his money." The hallway erupted into noise, Melissa crying, Robert lecturing, Ethan demanding respect, Linda guilt-tripping, Jack whining. Grace stayed silent, watching me with eyes far older than her 20 years. "Enough," I said, and the noise stopped. "I've given Melissa and Ethan $471,000 over 15 years. Weddings, houses, emergencies, all of it. In return, I got forgotten birthdays, ignored hospital stays, and constant demands for more. Don't contact me again until you're ready to apologize. Grace, you're always welcome. The rest of you, learn to solve your own problems." I closed the door. On the other side, the arguing started again. I walked to the window and waited. 20 minutes later, they filed out onto the street. Grace looked up and waved before heading to the bus stop. The rest piled into Robert's pickup and drove off. The apartment felt even quieter than usual, but it was the kind of quiet I had chosen. 2 weeks passed before I heard from any of them again. By then, my lawyer Robert Langford had called me back to his office to finalize the trust documents. "We're making Grace the sole beneficiary," he said, sliding the papers across his mahogany conference table. "This way, Melissa has no legal claim to any of your assets. Even if she tried, these structures are bulletproof." I signed with a steady hand. Each notary stamp sounded like a steel door locking shut. Robert leaned back. "I also recommend moving a portion of your pension into a Nevada Asset Protection Trust. It keeps it safe from any potential legal nonsense." Within hours, my savings, pension, and investments were all protected behind more legal walls than Fort Knox. For the first time in decades, my money was mine alone. That afternoon, I met Kate Anderson, a realtor recommended by a neighbor in my building. I told her I wanted something outside the city, quiet, on the water if possible. 3 days later, we were driving through neighborhoods in Spring Lake, about 40 minutes from Grand Rapids. When we pulled up to a small cedar-sided cottage overlooking the water, I knew before we stepped inside. 2 bedrooms, a wide back deck, and a dock that could have been pulled straight from my childhood summers. Previous owner was a Korean War vet, Kate said. Left it to his daughter, but she lives in California. She wants a quick sale. I didn't hesitate. Full asking price. Cash. No contingencies. She blinked. "You don't want to think it over?" "I've been thinking for 15 years. I said. "Now I'm done thinking." By the end of the week, the place was mine. That Friday night, I went to the Veterans Center in Muskegon for their weekly community dinner. I hadn't been there in years, always too busy helping with Melissa's latest crisis. As I filled my plate, a voice beside me said, "Haven't seen you here before." I turned to find Mary Collins, silver hair, warm brown eyes, a presence that felt like calm in human form. I'm George Whitman, I said. Used to come years back. Life got in the way. She smiled knowingly. Life has a way of doing that. I lost my husband 5 years ago. Volunteering here keeps me busy. We talked until the janitor started stacking chairs. She'd been a teacher for 37 years, raised 2 children who lived across the country, and kept her own house running without help. As we said goodnight, I heard myself ask, "Would you like to grab coffee sometime?" "I'd like that very much," she said. 3 weeks later, I was moved into the cottage. Mornings were coffee on the deck, evenings watching the sun sink over the water. Mary visited one Saturday with a plate of cookies and a small bouquet from her garden. We sat on the deck, talking about travel, books, and the strange freedom of living without someone else's demands in your ear. "Independence feels revolutionary at our age," she said, sipping her coffee. "I forgot what it felt like," I admitted. In late August, Grace called with news that made me pause mid-step. "Grandpa." Mom filed for divorce. She finally realized Dad's business plans were nothing but hot air. I looked over at Mary, who was seasoning vegetables for the grill. She caught my eye, raised an eyebrow, but kept working. She didn't need me to explain. "Ethan moved back in with his parents," Grace continued. "Mom's working 2 jobs just to stay afloat." "And Jack?" I asked. "He's working at Frank Patterson's garage. Full-time. Says he wants to talk to you." That evening, my phone rang again, Jack's name on the display. "Grandpa," he said, "I wanted to say I'm sorry." "And thank you?" "I get it now. If you'd given me that $3,000, I would have just wasted it. Frank says I've got real skill. I'm saving for my own apartment." When we hung up, Mary smiled and squeezed my shoulder. "Sounds like you saved that boy from becoming his father." I thought about that for a long moment before replying. Tough love, still love. It was the week before Thanksgiving when I saw the silver sedan pull into my driveway. Even before she stepped out, I knew it was Melissa. The car was one I'd helped her buy 3 years ago, back when I still thought help meant love. She looked older than her 48 years, shoulders slumped, eyes hollow, wearing clothes I remembered from seasons past. When she reached the porch, I opened the door but didn't move from the threshold. "Dad," she began, her voice thin, "I lost the apartment. The landlord evicted me last week. I'm staying at a motel, but I can't afford it much longer." I nodded once. "I'm sorry to hear that." Her eyes searched mine for an opening. "Please, one last time. Just enough for first month's rent and a security deposit. $5,000. I promise I'll pay it back." I could feel Mary step quietly into the hallway behind me. She didn't say anything, just stood there like a calm anchor. "I love you, Melissa," I said, "but help without responsibility doesn't help at all." That hit her like a slap. She pushed past me into the living room, scanning the furniture, the warm kitchen smells, the lake view out back. "This," she said, waving her arm at the room, "is what you chose over your own daughter, a cozy cottage while I'm homeless. I chose self-respect over enabling the same mistakes again and again," I replied evenly. Mary stepped forward now, her voice quiet but firm. "Melissa, your father has been helping you for 15 years. Maybe it's time to help yourself." Melissa's head snapped toward her. "Who are you to judge our family? I'm someone who learned independence after my husband died," Mary said. "And I've seen what happens when people refuse to." Melissa's voice rose, sharp and desperate. "This is cruel. Mom wouldn't approve. She'd be heartbroken." The mention of Linda's name stung, but I didn't let it show. "Your mother would want you to be strong, to stand on your own. She'd be heartbroken at what dependency has done to you." Melissa's eyes brimmed, but this time it wasn't performance, it was real fear. "I don't know how to do this alone. I've never had to. You're 48 years old, I said gently. It's time to learn. As she turned to leave, another car pulled up the drive. It was Grace, carrying a pumpkin pie. She gave her mother a quick glance but no hug. They passed each other in silence. Inside, Grace set the pie on the counter. Mom asked me to convince you to help her, she said. I told her you've already done more than enough. Maybe losing everything will finally teach her what working people already know. I nodded, grateful for her clarity. An hour later, Jack arrived with warm dinner rolls and photos of his new apartment. He looked proud, the kind of pride you can't buy for someone else. Ran into Mom on the road, he said, setting the rolls down. She looked upset. Your mother, Mary said from the kitchen, is learning some hard lessons about responsibility. Jack smirked. About time. That night, we sat at the dining table, me, Mary, Grace, and Jack. 4 people bound by respect, not obligation. The turkey was perfectly done, conversation easy, the laughter real. My phone buzzed once during dessert. Melissa's name lit the screen. I looked around the table at the people who valued my presence instead of my bank account, then pressed the power button until the phone went dark. More pie? I asked. Outside the cottage windows, Lake Michigan reflected the gold of the setting sun. Inside, the air felt warm in a way money could never buy. December rolled in with a thick layer of snow over the lake, and with it came silence from Melissa. I didn't know if she was finally giving me space or if she'd simply run out of ways to ask. Either way, I didn't chase her. Life at the cottage had settled into a rhythm I hadn't known I was missing, mornings with coffee on the deck, even in the cold, afternoons reading by the wood stove, evenings with Mary. She stayed over often enough that my neighbors started calling her the lady of the house, though she still kept her own place in town. One Friday, as we were finishing dinner, Mary glanced across the table. Have you thought about Christmas plans? I was going to invite Grace and Jack here, I said. Just the 3 of us. Maybe 4 if you'd like to join. Her eyes softened. I'd like that very much. The Saturday before Christmas, Grace called. Grandpa, Mom's staying at a friend's place now. She's working extra shifts but still behind on bills. She's different. Quieter. Less angry. People change when they run out of excuses, I said. Grace hesitated. She asked me for money. I told her no. That was the moment I realized the lesson had reached the next generation. Good, I said. It's not our job to save her from her own decisions. Christmas Day was the first holiday in years that didn't feel like a performance. Grace brought a casserole, Jack brought a toolbox to help me fix a stubborn door hinge, and Mary brought a pecan pie that actually tasted like home. We ate, laughed, and traded small gifts. No one asked for money, no one looked for an envelope under the tree. After dinner, Jack pulled me aside. I'm saving for a down payment on a small place. Frank's teaching me about budgeting. I never thought I'd care about that stuff, but turns out it feels good to be in control. I clapped a hand on his shoulder. That's what independence is, Jack. Control over your own life. January was quiet. Snow piled high, the lake froze solid, and Mary and I fell into a comfortable domestic pattern. Cooking together, playing cards in the evenings, and taking short walks bundled in so many layers we looked like 2 overstuffed armchairs moving down the lane. One night, by the fire, Mary looked at me and said, You've changed since we met. How so? You don't flinch when the phone rings anymore. You don't look tired. You've stopped carrying everyone else's weight. I thought about that. She was right. The constant undercurrent of tension that had followed me for years, wondering when the next emergency would arrive, was gone. In February, a letter arrived in my mailbox, handwritten in a familiar script. Dad, I'm sorry for the things I said. I didn't realize how much I was relying on you instead of myself. I'm trying to make it on my own now. It's harder than I thought, but I'm learning. I hope, maybe, we can talk when you're ready. Melissa. I read it twice, then set it on my desk. It wasn't an apology that erased years of entitlement, but it was the first crack in the wall she'd built between herself and reality. Mary found me looking out the window at the frozen lake. From Melissa? She asked. I nodded. Are you ready to answer? Not yet, I said. But I'm ready to believe she might mean it someday. By March, the ice began to break on the lake. Grace called to say she'd gotten a promotion. Jack sent me a picture of his new truck, paid for in full, and Mary started talking about a road trip in the spring. For the first time in years, my calendar was full of things I wanted to do, not things I was obligated to handle. And I knew one thing for certain: no matter what happened with Melissa, I wasn't going back to being anyone's safety net. April arrived with the scent of thawed earth and the sound of geese returning to the lake. Mary and I had started our mornings on the deck again, mugs in hand, watching the ice retreat. One Tuesday, as I was pruning back some brush along the shoreline, Mary came outside holding the phone. It's Melissa, she said. Calling, not texting. I took the phone but didn't answer right away. The last time I'd heard her voice in person, it had been sharp, defensive, full of demands. Now, months later, I wondered which version I'd get. I pressed the green button. Hello, Melissa. Dad? Her voice was quiet, careful. I just wanted to tell you I found a small apartment. It's not much, but it's mine. I paid the deposit myself. No loans. No help. That's good to hear, I said. There was a pause. I know you don't owe me anything, but I'd like to come by sometime. Not to ask for money, just to see you. I looked out over the water. Mary was kneeling in the garden, pulling early weeds, her silver hair catching the sun. I'll think about it, I said, and meant it. 2 weeks later, Grace and Jack came for Sunday lunch. Jack brought steaks to grill. Grace brought a bottle of wine and a bag of fresh rolls. After we'd eaten, Jack leaned back in his chair. Frank's making me lead mechanic next month. Comes with a raise and my own work bay. That's excellent, I said. Pride in your work pays dividends no bank can match. Grace smiled. And I've been setting up an emergency fund. Learn from your stories, Grandpa, not to rely on anyone else's wallet. I realized then that whatever happened with Melissa, the legacy Robert Harris once tried to guilt me about was already here, in these two young people who had learned the value of standing on their own feet. In early May, Mary and I finally took that road trip we talked about all winter. We drove through the Upper Peninsula, stopping at small diners and lakeside motels, the kind of trip that didn't need an itinerary. One evening, parked along the shore of Lake Superior, Mary looked out at the horizon. You ever think about selling the cottage and just going? Traveling full-time? I chuckled. Not yet. I like having a place to come back to. But I could see us taking longer trips. She smiled, and I realized how different this felt from every other relationship in my life. Nothing owed, nothing extracted. Just two people choosing to share their time. When we returned, a letter was waiting in my mailbox. Another from Melissa. Dad, I'm still in my apartment. I've been working 2 jobs and managed to pay every bill on time. I sold some old jewelry to clear my credit card. I'm trying. I miss you. This time, I sat at the kitchen table with a pen and paper. Melissa, I'm glad to hear you're standing on your own. That's all I ever wanted for you. I'm willing to meet for coffee, just coffee, so we can talk. But understand, my boundaries remain. I won't return to the way things were. Dad. I sealed the envelope and felt no fear about what might come next. On the first Saturday of June, I sat on the deck with Mary, watching a pair of sailboats drift across the lake. Grace was bringing her boyfriend by that evening. Jack had promised to stop in next weekend to help me with a project. My phone was on the table, face down, silent unless I chose to answer it. You look content, Mary said. I am, I told her. It took me most of my life to figure it out, but I finally learned love isn't proven by what you give away. It's in what you protect, and who you choose to share it with. She reached over and took my hand. Out on the lake, the wind filled the sails, and I thought about how, for the first time in years, I was steering my own course, and no one else's hands were on the wheel.